All right, Julie, I'm going to say a few words and then I'll hand it over to you. So thanks everybody for, thanks for everybody for joining us for our small firms monthly meeting. And I also invite you, if you haven't been there already, every Wednesday we have a Zoom call at 9 a.m. Reoccurring, pausing next week for the holidays, but you're welcome to come and we just talk about a bunch of different topics, including marketing and tailoring our message, which we're going to be discussing today with Julie Flattery. So with that, I'll hand it over to her. Thanks, Julie.
Hey, thanks. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all today and share what I know. A couple of things I wanted to say in advance of the presentation is just that we have a variety of architecture sizes here, project sizes and firm sizes. But what I'm talking about, I think, applies to every size firm and to every person in the firm, no matter how many people or projects you have and how big or small your projects are. One of the things that Jen told me about was that you guys were interested in tailoring your messages, your proposal messages to a variety of client types. And one of the things I told Jen is I think that it's kind of the same thing, whether you're going after many residential projects or you're going after some residential and some commercial. The approach to writing a proposal is always the same. You can glean from similar proposals, of course, for a starting point, but there are always those elements that are necessary to recreate in order to speak to a specific project type, a specific client and what their needs and what they're about, the site. There's so many factors, as we all know, that go into what you need to talk about in a proposal. So we're going to expand on that a bit. If you had signed up by Monday, then I got an email list with your name on it, and I was able to send a questionnaire to you to fill out. And what I heard most from the people who did fill it out, and what I always hear most from everyone I send this questionnaire to, is that they want to know how to set themselves apart from every other firm that's going after this project. And as small firms, I know that today, and Kathy mentioned this earlier, you guys are competing sometimes with larger firms, and there's the work. Sometimes the work is light, and larger firms are going after smaller projects. So this is how you would approach this, whether you are a small or large firm. One little thing I want to mention, if you guys can hold your questions to the end, I've got about 15 minutes that I can spend with you for Q&A. I'm also happy to answer any other questions you have in the future via email. You can schedule a phone call with me. My deconstructed partner, Claire Schatzel, is here today, and she will be available. She does the graphic design portion of our workshop. So if you are interested in asking any questions about graphics, she can answer those at the end as well, or we can schedule a time with you later. I noticed in the questionnaires, there are people who don't use InDesign. You guys, some of you are using Word, and somebody said Bluebeam and some programs I'm not really familiar with. If you'd ever like to talk to me about that, I will give you a very strong plug for using InDesign, because I think especially for small firms, when you don't have a lot of help, it can really, really speed up your process. It's so much more user-friendly for proposals. And you don't need to be a graphic designer to learn it. It's pretty intuitive. And so that's just something we'd be happy to talk to you about in the future. Okay, so I'm going to dive on in here and share this with you. Okay, so today what we're going to talk about are what are the goals of a proposal, a few tips from interview selection committees, the importance of writing an excellent cover letter, responding to the RFPQ with targeted project writing, using photo selection to enhance your project stories, and fun with resumes. So let's go. So what are the goals of a proposal? Someone said in their questionnaire, how do I make an awesome proposal? So I think if you follow some of these goals, you will make an awesome proposal. So you do You do this by strategizing how you'll get the job in advance of collecting information and writing the proposal. So I'm a big advocate for this, to sit down before you even start. Think about the criteria that the client has asked you for, or that's in the RFP queue. Think about what they need and what their project is like, and strategize how you can set yourself apart from other people. What do you have? What are your assets that can build your story? By diving deeply into what your company offers to set yourself apart from equally qualified firms, by talking more about their needs than what your firm can do. So this proposal is about them and what their project is, and not about all the awards you've won, or just what a great designer you are, but you really want to focus on them. By demonstrating enthusiasm for the project and how well you understand it, them, and their goals. And we're going to talk about this pretty deeply today. By checking and double checking the criteria to ensure that you respond to it at every opportunity. I always tell people, don't make them search throughout the proposal for the answers to the questions they're asking you. Make it really obvious to them. By writing concisely to show you respect their time. So not throwing in a bunch of stuff they didn't ask for. Sometimes you have a page limit and you can't do that anyway, but I've seen proposals where they've just gone, well, we think this might be fun, we'll put this in too. They are sometimes reviewing a number of proposals, and it's difficult for them when they have so much to read. And by scrupulously proofing and eliminating typos, rewriting bad copy that you might be given by other team members. I don't just, if I have a sub-consultant on my team, or more than one sub-consultant, if I feel like the writing isn't strong enough, I either send it back to them or rewrite it myself. And I will tell everybody, typos, typos, typos. Let's be really, really careful about that. So here are a few tips from interview selection committee members. I don't know if any of you read it, but I wrote an article for the Seattle DJC, and it also ended up in the Oregon DJC. And I interviewed 3 different selection committee members about what their process is, what they like and dislike in proposals, what they're really looking for, and things that really make them enthusiastic about hiring a particular firm. So So Rob Fix from the Port of Bellingham said that the teams who understand their priorities, well, I'll just read his quote verbatim. The teams who understand our priorities and have done the kind of work and have the kind of enthusiasm we're looking for are apparent. We can tell what proposals are custom made to respond to the RFP and which ones are cut and pasted from another proposal. So this goes back a little bit to what I was talking about in the beginning. You need to have elements in the proposal that are really directed towards them. Libby Ramirez from Oregon State University said, I want to hear what's exciting about our project and what first intrigued you. When someone says they have been dying for this project to be posted for years, that's the kind of thing we really appreciate. Susan Steinbrenner from Evergreen Public School says, relevant quality photos are appreciated. We were doing a STEM accelerator project that was a renovation of an existing 10,000 square foot school. One firm put in all these CTE photos. I give them credit because they were trying to relate to our project, but it was really kind of a miss. So we will talk about this later in the presentation about using relevant photos and what you can do. I also threw in this quote from Libby because I really liked it. When you see a firm give a fresh take that is directed to OSU, they've looked at a different project on our campus, or maybe they've looked at some of our work and what we've done in the past, and they incorporate that information into their response, it really stands out. So demonstrating passion, showing people that you know who they are and that you understand them is a really big component to writing an effective proposal. And that's what we're going to talk about here when we discuss cover letters. So the importance of writing an excellent cover letter. I always tell people to think like a journalist. So if you're writing a newspaper article, you're establishing your angle. This goes back to what we talked about initially when I was talking about gathering your information ahead of time. What are you going to talk about? So when you gather that information, think about the projects that you've done that are relevant, of course, and the team members you have that have worked on that kind of project, the subs who you worked with before and on those types of projects. And then you want to write a strong lead, and that's the opening paragraph, the opening sentence. You want to reel them in. So we do this by, first I'll tell you why I think cover letters are so important, and just a few little tips that I think are important to include. The cover letter is the first thing they're going to read about your firm. So that's why I say reel them in. It should always be on letterhead, and that might seem obvious to some people, but I've seen a number of proposals that don't have cover letters on letterhead. And it should be, the salutation should always include the selection committee, if there is one, along with the person whose name is on the RFPQ. I always say don't use their first name, even if they're your best friend and you've worked with them for years. This is a different forum, and it's supposed to be a forum of equity, so call them Mr. or Ms. Or if you're unsure of their gender and can't find out, they don't use pronouns, there's no photo of them online, then use their full name. So dear Mr. and Ms. Smith and members of the selection committee, or dear Pat Smith and members of the selection committee. What I tell everyone to avoid is an opening paragraph that says, we are pleased to present, or we are excited to submit. This is a really, really common way for people to start out a cover letter and a proposal. I've read plenty myself that always start out this way. And in an interview I did quite a few years ago with the former director of the Port of Bellingham, he said, if I read one more proposal opening that begins, we are pleased to present, I'm going to scream. So this is your opportunity to talk about something much more poignant and much more relatable to this firm than, or this client, than we are pleased to present. So better options. What's their company focus or philosophy? What are their project and business goals? And I like to talk about business goals. Sometimes you won't know what they are, but sometimes you know what they are. And that's equally important to the project. So if you have been asked to design a food court in a student union, and with the hope that they will increase campus revenues, then not only do you want to talk about what their project is about and what the design will be like, but you also want to talk about how you're going to help them with that goal. Perhaps you're going to set the food court in a particular location in that student union so that it's very visible and people will go to it right away. So, whatever those business goals are, if you can possibly address them, please do. You also want to think about what successful projects you might have done together. That's a great opening to a cover letter. If you've worked with someone before, especially if you've worked with them several times, then you can mention that, because that's an efficiency that other teams might not have. You might understand better than most people going after this job how they work. They don't like clock calls at 6 o'clock in the morning, or they prefer to talk to you at 8 p.m., or they like systems, or they like a particular form of schedule. So demonstrate that, not only mention that you have worked with these people before, or these clients before, but also why that's important, what that will do to help make their project more efficient. You want to, another thing you can consider is, what do you know about them that you can include in this letter that shows you're paying attention and understand them? So one avenue to this is researching their website, especially if it's somebody that's relatively new to you, who your firm is getting to know. So go to their website. Mission statements are a great way to learn a little bit about what a company's priorities are. So for example, Lane Community College, they say that they are the community's college. We provide accessible, quality, learning-centered educational opportunities that promote student success. So if you're going after a proposal with Lane, you might start a cover letter like this, and everything that's underlined is me using their words again back to them. So as the community's college, you provide an enormous service, making learning accessible to all by eliminating barriers to education and creating partnerships with organizations in your region. Expanding your health, medical, and fitness program by adding a new, sustainable, learner-centered building is an exciting endeavor for Lane Community College to undertake. So you're showing them, I've done my research, I understand who you are and what your priorities are, and I'm really happy to be part of that. I decided to include one more example here of an opening paragraph because a number of people had medical their firms provided healthcare design. So this one is from OHSU in their about section. Sometimes the mission statement doesn't exist or it's in the about section. So read the about section. Our vision is to partner to make Oregon a national leader in health and science innovation for the purpose of improving the health and well-being of Oregonians and beyond. So here we have, again, underlining the words that they use. As the #1 hospital in Oregon and a national leader in health and science innovation, you provide an enormous service, improving the health and quality of life for all Oregonians. We know you provide this service through excellence, innovation, and leadership in healthcare, education, and research. Like you, we also see our work as a service to our community that encompasses excellent design, innovative solutions focused on process improvements, and leadership that is fully engaged to build collaborative partnerships for team success. So you're telling them we understand you, but you're also drawing a parallel between your firm and theirs. We do this too. We believe what you believe. This is a relatable, a way to relate to them. So then we move on to the body paragraph. I always tell people to seize the opportunity to talk about things that can't be covered in the proposal. Maybe there's a hefty page limit and you can't include full page resumes with specific team qualifications. Maybe you're only allowed 3 project examples, and or maybe they have to be projects that are completed within the last 5 years, and that precludes you from including projects that you think are stronger. There can be lots of RFP requirements that can be limiting to what you can talk about. So this is the one place that you're actually allowed to. No one's going to tell you what to write, or most often they're not. Occasionally I have seen that where they've told us what to write. So some of the things that you can do here are you can start by summing up specific firm qualifications and experience that's relevant to their projects, especially if it is a project that you're not able to include because it's maybe 4 years old and all your projects have to be 3. So this was a particular example for Fairbanks Hall on the OSU campus. And everything that's underlined here are from projects that we couldn't include in the RFP, but that had direct relationships with what they were looking for. So they needed a renovation of a historical wood construction building in a historic district to prepare for future use. It was located on the campus's main street. All of these things were exactly what we had. And we're showing them that we've got this experience. You can also show passion about how their project contributes to the community, users, and environment, etc. So I think I think a lot of people are doing projects that they really believe in. And what does it mean to you to be able to do something like this? So in this particular scenario, this was for a transit station. We wrote, we have come to appreciate the way station architecture not only facilitates the safe and efficient movement of people, but also how a well-designed station becomes a member of the community and contributes to its vitality. So you're showing that this really means something to you. And by the way, I forgot to say this in the beginning. I think I did. We do have a handout. I do have a handout that I'll be sending all of you, and it's got all this information in here. So don't worry about if you don't get it all down. And then for the closing paragraph, you want to, how do you close? Avoid closings like, we look forward to talking with you more about our qualifications, because that's about you. Instead, You can say something in this particular scenario for an admin office for a school district. We look forward to hearing more about your projects and discussing how we can help you create a successful new admin office that serves the district. So that's about them. In this particular scenario, I thought this was a beautiful closing for Bellingham Public Schools admin office proposal, a job which we did get. Bellingham Public Schools, in partnership with the community, has created a school system of exceptional quality and commitment to fulfilling its promise to our children. We appreciate your willingness to make bold decisions and tackle big challenges on behalf of our students and families, whether that means healthier food, universal pre-K, examining what a free education really means, or viewing your new home as a strategic asset that plays a critical role in the life of this community. We would be honored to bring our experience and resources to work for you in the creation of an admin office for the district. So that is quite a finish, and it not only tells them that you are thrilled to work for them if possible, but also that you appreciate what they're doing in your community. Also on this one, they had the whole architecture team sign the cover letter, which I thought was a really nice touch. So I want to talk a little bit about project stories, moving on from the cover letter. Aim to write the project story as soon as it wraps. This can be hard for everyone, no matter how large or small your firm is. Everybody's moving on to the next project, and you think, oh, I'll get to this eventually. If at all possible, at the very least, throughout the life of your project, write down notes of specific things that happen that are important. You might have done something, come up with a really interesting way to navigate construction on an occupied site. You might have come up with a really innovative kitchen design that in a space that was really too small for a kitchen. There might be numerous things that you've contributed to this project that someday you may forget about. And there can be many times when you'll have to write about these things in proposals. So the more you can write about your project when it's fresh, the better I think it works out for you in the future. I have a firm in Bellingham that I'm on a retainer agreement with, and every time they finish a project, I interview the project manager and the principal in charge, and I write a complete project story. And then from that, they're able to pick out what they need for each proposal based on that proposal's criteria. And they recently told me that this is working really well for them. So they never have to really write new copy for a proposal because they have this huge story, and they can pull out what's necessary to respond to the RFP. What should the project story include? A brief overview of the project to start out with. So it might be a revitalization of downtown, a replacement of an existing building. It may have some important component to serving the community. But I try to get people to avoid starting out a project story with, this is a 10,000 foot renovation of a dilapidated historic building on a site in the middle of downtown. And that to me is not as exciting of an opening. I'm just going to flip forward and read this one to you. So this was for an affordable housing project in Bellingham. And I wrote, the development of the former Aloha Motel site on Samish Way was part of the city of Bellingham's vision to transform this austere section of the neighborhood into an urban village. An urban village's primary goal is to become less automobile focused by adding residential and mixed-use buildings, green spaces, and other features that focus on pedestrians and bicycles. In 2017, Bellingham Housing Authority purchased the site and hired us to help them make this vision into a reality. So that's a much more interesting story to read, and it makes you want to read more. You want to know more about this project because it has an interesting opening that actually tells a story. Also include the big ideas that shaped it. So it might be restoring a sense of community pride, maintaining historic presence while accommodating modern technology, lots of different themes there that you should include. You want the details. So unique challenges and opportunities. I mentioned the construction on an occupied site scenario, preservation standards. What are those little things? Maybe you navigated permitting really well with that particular city. So there's lots of different things there that I think can be part of your larger project story. And then, of course, basic information. So that way, square footage, site, square footage of buildings, cost, all of those things. Put that on your project story as well, just so that you'll have everything in one place and ready to go when you need to write about it. So responding to the RFP with targeted project writing and photography. Start by going back to your original plan. So I mentioned earlier, you're thinking about, I've mentioned it a few times actually, you're thinking about what are your stories that you want to tell? How are you going to back up your experience with some interesting project copy? So remember that, what your strategies are. What did the client emphasize in their request? Was it the addition of a certain learning space for a university or a new military training facility that needed to accommodate a variety of teaching methods? What are those things that they are emphasizing? And then make a list of those things so that you be sure and hit that at every opportunity. Decide how you want to tell these stories. So yeah, I mentioned before the project story, having a complete project story to glean from can help you a lot. There have been times when I've rewritten a whole project sheet. I'm assuming that a lot of people maybe have some boilerplate copy for a project sheet all ready to go that gives you the general overview of a project. And those are great for like prospective clients who aren't really asking for specific information. But you can take those, you can rewrite them to speak specifically to the RFP. That is more time consuming, but occasionally can be extremely worthwhile if it's something in your heart you just know you can and want to get. You can also revise your project sheets by using some of the story relevancy, so you can keep some of that basic information in there, but then you add some of the little pieces that are more relevant to their scope of work. I think bullet points and icons are a really great way to address your specific qualifications, and I'm going to show you some examples of this and how effective it can be. You can do a combination of both. You can make your copy relevant while also using bullets and icons. And then in addition to all of that, choosing photos that back up your story. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So when you're comparing your projects to theirs, this was a particular project for Roosevelt High School in Portland after Portland Public Schools passed the bond. And we drew a direct comparison to Roosevelt High School in Seattle because the criteria was uncannily the same. So one of the things Roosevelt High School in Seattle had was an old historic theater that was no longer functioning well, and they repurposed that into a modern library. So this is exactly the criteria that Roosevelt High School and Portland Public Schools wanted. And so we used, you can see these photos are very relevant to what is going on for Roosevelt High School in Portland. And we put little captions in case there is any wonder about why we included these particular photos. So you can see the historic theater and the new library. And then we wrote the copy saying, drawing those direct comparisons from this Seattle High School to the Portland High School. So similar to what Portland Public Schools is facing today, Roosevelt High School in Seattle first opened its doors in 1922 to high expectations. So we're drawing these direct comparisons and showing them we understand what you need and we've done it before. Icons are beautiful, a beautiful way of summing up your information. And there's visually, the visual communication of icons works really well, I think, because if they, for example, here we've got somebody who wanted a preschool. They wanted you to have experience with private schools. They wanted you to have experience with site development and experience with permitting for the city of Shoreline. So we create these icons and we put them on every project sheet that has these exact forms of experience. Some project sheets might only have 3, some might have 4, but they're able to look at your project sheets at a glance and say, this is great. Look, they've got all 4 of them here, or they've got three of the 4 things that we need. And so it's really efficient for them. And as I said, sometimes we're not really clear on how we're answering their questions. There can be no mistake here that you've looked at what their criteria is and you're responding to it. And there will be resources on your handout for places where you can get icons for free in case you're worried about how am I going to have the time to create an icon with all the other things I have to do in life. In this particular scenario, we use bullet points instead. That is also equally effective. I think the importance here is really pointing out to them, we've read this, we have this information. You don't even have to read every word of our project sheet to know right here that we've got what you're asking for. Use photo selection to enhance your project stories, not just for project sheets, meaning throughout your proposal. I am an advocate for having every page have photos on it if possible, and or at least every other page. So if you're talking about a project approach or about your experience with a particular building type, you can still include photos on those pages, whether or not it's a particular project description. And then you can consider captioning them. Sometimes that can be time consuming, but if you do have time, it can be a very effective way of saying, look, I'm showing you this building because it has exactly what you're asking for on your RFP. So before and after shots tell a great story. And in this particular scenario, the section was called Historic Structures Experience. And what we showed here was how the school looked before and how we opened up the school to be a more welcoming environment for the students. You can use captioning to point out project scope similarities. So in this particular proposal, they wanted experiential graphics. And so we showed them a picture of a high school that had that throughout their hall. And we talked a little bit about how it brightened up the halls and it was relevant to the type of school that it was. Good construction shots can also help you tell a story. I think everybody's been in positions where they might have a really relevant project, but it's not built yet. So see what you can do construction-wise. And we all have the capacity to go out and take construction shots with really good iPhone cameras these days if you don't hire a photographer or if the contractor isn't taking photos. So, but make sure you go out and frame the shots and do some really nice photographs and think about how the story that you want to tell when you're taking the photographs. So for example, when it comes to photography, be innovative. So outside the box ideas can include, did a project team member or a client take construction shots? I know I have gotten construction shots from the client because they happened to have a campus photographer. So that can work really well. Just think about who else might be documenting this project. Check out client social media pages for events that have taken place in spaces you have worked on to show how the project is being used. I think this is particularly effective for people who had to have projects photographed during COVID and weren't necessarily able to have people in their shots. So of course they need to be good, well-composed shots, but I've used client social media posts with their permission in proposals and award submittals. Team up with landscape designers for photos taken once plants, trees, and grass have filled in. As architects, I think we all want to go out and get the shots immediately before things get well used, well loved. But oftentimes there's not a lot of landscape yet. So this is an opportunity to go back when the landscape designers go in on a shoot with them or buy some of their photos, keep in touch with them and see if you can get some new photos of an exterior with the trees filled in. Have a photographer come to your office to take a variety of shots that can be used for general firm info. A lot of proposals, they want to know more about your firm and how you work and who your staff is. photos of people working together, people in a conference room, people doing charrettes, those kinds of things can really go a long way in a proposal. One thing I tell people about proposals, they're not just looking at your experience, they're looking at who you are as people. So are you the kind of people they can work with for the duration of their project? Is it going to be at least a little bit fun to work with you because of the kind of people that you are? So that's equally important. Use stock photos for relevant lifestyle images when there are none available. So I'm not a huge advocate for stock photography all the time, but there's some pretty good stuff out there that you can find these days, and those resources are also in your handout. They're here as well, along with the free icons. So fun with resumes. I'm not going to get too far in depth with resumes, but I do want to talk about the bios. To me, that's the most important part of everybody's resume. It's great to have project lists of relevant experience, of course, but who are you? Like I just said, who are the people they're going to work with, and why do they want to work on their project? So describe their role on the project in terms of relevance. Include a sentence or two about why they want to work on this project. I do this almost every proposal with the project team. I ask each person individually, why do you want to do this project? And people have great stories, and it goes a long way with the client. People will talk about, I used to live in this neighborhood, or I went to this school, or I lived in this house before and I grew up here. So what are the stories that you have about why this project means something to you, and tell them. What qualifications will they bring to set them apart from every other person going after this job? Everybody knows what a project manager here does. Everybody knows what a project designer does. There's a list of responsibilities they have. It needs to be more than just that list. So, for example, this was an RFP for a proposal for a new transit center in a major city using a CMGC delivery method with an emphasis on sustainability. The project criteria was for a project manager, and they pulled this out. They wanted a 2-page resume for a PM in this proposal with strong communication skills to assist the client with making transit accessible to everyone and a station design that creates public and user pride. So an underwhelming response would be, Anna has been working in this profession for 20 years. During that time, she has designed 15 transit centers. In her role as a project manager, she will use her ability to communicate effectively with all team members to ensure a seamless process from start to completion. She will also facilitate design meetings, review cost estimates, and lead the sub-consultant team. So it's a fine answer. It's the answer most people will give. A purpose-driven response, however, might be, Anna has been working in the profession for 20 years. During that time, she has designed 15 transit centers in major cities using the CMGC process. She understands that these projects are an indispensable part of a strong community. As a result, she endeavors to create transit environments that are rewarding and enriching for both employees and users. What she appreciates most is that they enhance communities by encouraging sustainable living and bringing people of all backgrounds together. And then we finish with her skills and how. Anna believes that establishing connections with people is what makes projects significant. This attribute is beneficial to every project she works on because it enables the resolution of complex issues quickly and with consensus. Because if you're telling them about something, you need to tell them why you're telling them. I have something that I call throwaway statements. And so that's things like, she knows how to design and construct a project that exceeds expectations. Great. How does she do that? He's worked on 25 medical buildings, so he knows how to design a successful project. When you're making those statements, consider adding, how do you make that happen? What systems have you created? Maybe you've got some project management strategies that make every project that you work on much more efficient. What are those? And what have you learned? What, and if you've designed 10 of the same kind of buildings over time, you've probably learned a lot. I'm sitting here talking to you today because I've done so many proposals that I've learned a lot, and this is how I go about it. So what have you learned? Those are some of the most important things I think to include in a bio. And wow, how did I do that so quickly? I don't know. Anyway, we've got time for lots of questions if people are interested in asking them, and I'd love to chat. Anybody?
I can kick it off, Julie. Thank you so much. That was so compelling. Last week, somebody had brought up the fact that they had received some feedback on their RFP that their language was too jargony and that it should really be closer towards that of what, like a fourth grade level, which seems super low to me. But like, what is the strategy or the target for that for language?
It's so funny because I do have in our big workshop, I have this whole section on that editing and all of that. And I have this picture of Moira Rose. I don't know if any of you are Schitt's Creek fans, but she can't just say something. It's so elaborate, like a bird has delivered its ovum on my car, instead of just saying. So I have this slide that talks about that. It's not it's I don't think it's so much I'm sorry that they use the word fourth grade or the words fourth grade, but I think what I'm a believer in nouns. We don't need to be extravagant. We're not trying to be poets here. We want to deliver really concise and information directly to people that makes sense. And one of the things I think sometimes people forget is that you're oftentimes talking to people who've never done a project like this before in their entire lives. They have no idea what goes into it. And so that's the kind of information that think about if you weren't an architect, what would you say to people to explain, what would you want to hear from people to explain what they're doing in their terms? Does that help at all? I wouldn't go to the fourth grade thing. I would just pretend like that's just them trying to find a way to tell you to just speak to them as a layperson.
Yeah, no, that makes sense a lot, especially when you were talking about it. I think it was in this last slide. If somebody has particular systems that they put in place to be more efficient, or to me, that would be a little bit challenging to articulate clearly without, making it sound like, yeah, I have some great spreadsheets. Like how sexy is that? But I realize like the intent. So.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Spreadsheets aren't necessarily sexy, and you probably don't want to get delve too deeply into it, but just showing them that we've got these systems. And I think there's maybe some little tweaks here and there that you can do to make it sound a little bit interesting. If you ever want to run anything by me, let me know.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Oh, looks like there's a hand, Caitlin.
Okay.
Hi there. Hi, Julie. Thank you for this talk. It was really insightful and helpful. I am coming from a place of not having an architecture background, and I am responsible for writing a lot of content on projects. And you had mentioned doing some interviews with firms to write project stories for them. I was just curious if you would be willing to share some of the questions that you ask those firms that you use to write your project stories. And I totally understand if you worked really hard on that and you want to keep that information private. But sometimes my challenge is that I don't know the right questions to ask just because I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah, I understand. So some of the things, you'll get this in your handout again, and some of the things that I talked about, like what are the big ideas? Ask them that question. What are the big ideas for this project? I'm sure they'll have some answers for you. And oftentimes I have a list of questions I'm going to ask, but their responses will get me to ask questions I hadn't even expected. Someone might tell you, well, it's not LEED certified, but actually we did match LEED silver qualifications here. And you go, okay, well, how did you do that? Tell me all the components, So think about what they're telling you and what can further help you tell a story. But I think the big idea is the challenges. And of course, I'm careful about how I word those kinds of things. But if, again, I'll go back to it, if you have construction on an occupied site and it's a school, it's 3 classrooms on a school campus, for a high school campus, you've got issues that you've got to deal with here. So what are those issues and how are you dealing with it? People often come up with very innovative solutions to these kinds of problems that happen throughout the life of a project. So ask them that, what are the challenges? What were the opportunities? How did you, if there's a community process component, a lot of public projects, you have to start out with showing your designs to the community and getting input. So did you have a particular strategy that helped you reach consensus among all of these people that are coming to these meetings? And I think in particular now, and we didn't have a lot of time to get into this today, but in particular now, people are interested in inclusive, how inclusive are you in your process? And that's a big one. And when I did the DJC article, and if you think it might be helpful for you, I'd say read that article, because it'll tell you a lot about what these selection committees are thinking. But we did deep dive a little bit into this whole question of equity, and they take it very seriously, and people are not responding to these questions with what they're looking for. So does that help you at all, Caitlin? Okay, yeah. And like I said, feel free to ask me more questions later. Anybody
I have a question? Yeah, hi. Thank you, by the way, Julie. I really appreciate your time and insight. So I have a question about business-to-business marketing versus direct-to-client. Like the proposal examples that you gave were more so trying to win, I guess. Well, I come from the residential side, so I'm trying to look at it through that lens. And we're a design build firm as well. So we're on the contractor side, and we work with architects. And so architects are some of the people that we would be writing these proposals for as well. I mean, ultimately it does make its way to the client, but at some point they're the first round of vetting. And then also another avenue that we pursue is like realtors and some other things. And so I'm kind of asking, are there any significant differences between what you went over today, direct to consumer client versus direct to another business?
So when you're working with realtors, what are they asking you to are you responding to a particular scope, or are you just marketing in general?
Marketing in general, basically trying to have them think of us first, so that when they're selling a house, they know that they can pass that homeowner off directly to us, either for build services or design and build services, or in partnership with another architect, and we're just the builder. We want to be the first one that they think of.
Mm-hmm. I have so many feelings about how you do go about that sort of thing, because I do think let me take a minute. So for design build, I don't think it's really that different than you're still doing a proposal. They do ask a lot of different questions that are more contractor related. And so some of that proposal is going to be up to the contractor, and hopefully, many contractors are just as meticulous about proposals as architects. So that, I think, I don't see a lot of difference in that process. But when you're talking about marketing to people who have not necessarily asked you for something, that's a whole different game, I think. And first of all, I still think that what you want to tell them is information that's relevant to them. So in that way, it's much like what I'm talking about. But I also think that the first key to something like a situation like that is to get to know them. So I am not an advocate for walking in somebody's door and handing them a brochure and a business card. That's not how we make relationships. I'm an advocate, and I have a little workshop that I do on this actually. I'm an advocate for sitting down in your first meeting and getting to know them and who they are and what their expectations are, and seeing what you can do for them. And it may include something like, they may tell you like, we're doing a bunch of houses in a particular neighborhood, and perhaps you've been in that neighborhood and done work there before. So, hey, I'd be happy to show you some of the results of some of those projects. Maybe it will help you with yours. So it's always about how you can help them, and not like, here's my brochure, I do great work. Does that help at all?
Yeah, there is a lot of overlap between what your presentation and that. Yeah. Thank you.
Sure. Anyone else? Nope.
Really, I was going to say, if nobody else has any questions, you kind of touched a little bit on the other services that you provide, but if you could just kind of give a high level of everything that you guys provide.
Sure. Yeah. So I pretty much provide the gamut of marketing services. I've done websites, social media posts, e-blasts, do a lot of those, ghostwriting articles for people. I've written a number of articles, but I ghostwrite for principals sometimes. I pitch projects. Like I just had a client that got a affordable housing project in the Seattle DJC because I pitched that story to them, and they actually used some of my copy for that. I help train staff in marketing, train staff in proposal development. Our workshops, we have 5 workshops that we offer. They're about 90 minutes and they're over a 5-week period. We're actually planning a couple for after the first of the year, and we have one that we want to direct to architects and principals, because that's sort of different than having a marketing team come. We offer discounts for registered small businesses, quite a substantial discount. And the workshops include proposal reviews. So and then we do a one-on-one with the person to talk about what we found in their proposal from a graphic and writing standpoint. And then, I have other small workshops I've done before, like what Stephanie was talking about, how to approach clients, how to tell a story and how to find the nugget in a story, those kinds of things. So really, pretty much, and then, of course, Claire's got all the graphics side of it. So really, there's probably not much that you would ask us to do that we haven't done already. If you read my bio, I came from a family in architecture. My father was an architect. My grandfather was a landscape architect. That's how I grew up. So to me, it's not just a job, it's a passion. I spend weekends touring architecture projects. I'm interested, I'm a geek, and I love it all. So I come from that perspective, and I feel like from all of these years of experience and from being so passionate about it, I have a pretty good understanding of why a project is important. So often, I think what people hire me for is I can write without a lot of principal input, so I don't take up staff time that are trying to be billable. They can just have me come in and do it for them. So that helps people quite a bit, because as we all know, it's a very encompassing profession with lots of hours and overtime. So really, I'm trying to make people's lives more simple, if I can.
No, that's great. Oh, go ahead, Rex.
Thanks, Jen. Thank you, Julie. My name is Rex. I'm from Eugene, and I have a lot to think about now. So thanks to you. I also realize what I'm doing wrong in a good way. So my challenge, it's not a challenge, sorry. There's so much to think about, but I think in part you were answering Stephanie's question, and it got me to thinking about kind of my target audience is often very small and not public. So what's the smallest proposal you've ever put together.
Ooh,
And,
gosh.
and, you know, and I asked that because some of my clients have actually asked me like no more than 1 or 2 pages. Like, so
Yeah.
is that realistic? There's a lot of, I like your ideas about the cover letter, and then maybe your proposal is more like a cover letter, because there's no targets here that you need to answer for these clients. It's kind of an open page.
Do they ask for anything specific, or do they just say, tell me about you? Just tell me about you. Yeah, that's fun.
That's correct. Like your cover letter. So
parameters are so much more easy sometimes, I think. You know, I think it's really important to focus in on, are these residential clients, or what kind of work is it?
These are small, we'll just quantify them as small commercial projects where I'm trying to give them kind of a breakdown in the costing of my services, you know, ultimately with a, you know, a fee. So, and the reason for the fee, right? So, yeah, there's a bit of your qualifications is helpful, why you're, you know, the person or the team, and yeah, so it's a little bit of we say numbers and words, right?
Right. Yeah, that's a tough one. I think I would probably want to sum up what, if I were to look at what projects I had that were relevant to their particular type of project, I'd think about writing a strong paragraph about, here, you know, I've done this work in this capacity before. And then also your own qualifications are important and why you want to work on their project. So, and then I think, let's see, is it usually just you, or do you have more people, or is it you alone on the team?
I have another team member. So,
another team member, yeah. So you want to get your qualifications in there, why you want to work on it, and what experience you have. And I think you can do that in a small space. It's just, it takes some editing to be concise. And I think everybody who's done a proposal kind of understands that, because we're even if it's, you know, even if they want 20 pages, it still ends up being so much information that you have to be concise. But I would say, I would approach it the same way I'm talking about in this workshop. What is the story I want to tell? What do I do differently from someone else who might go after this project? And I would really emphasize that. And, you know, if you can write that in a streamlined way, 2 pages can sometimes not be too bad. And I mean, I've done huge proposals where we've just changed the margins a little and, you know, minimized the font. And Kathy.
Julie, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we need to finish this up for another program that's coming up. So if you have like a final thing to say real quick.
I'll send you all a handout. I'm going to get an email list from Jen. On it is contact information, everything. Feel free, if I didn't finish your question, or if you have more, feel free to get in touch. And I hope to see you all again. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks everybody for coming.
Yeah, thank you all.
See you next time.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Julie.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.